You're 15. Your family just moved into the city and it's your first day in a new school. You don't know anyone. You don't know where anything is. You aren't even sure what classes you have. Everyone around you is going to be someone you know nothing about. You don't know how to act. You don't know what to say. You don't know what to do. You have just entered the social learning zone. There's an old saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. It means that in order to fit in, act like the people around you are acting and do what they do when they do it. That's a useful skill, and sometimes it's called modeling behavior. If you want to know about sports, talk and hang out with people who like sports. If you like chess, hang out with and play with good chess players. Learn from them. Learn what they do, then do it yourself. Children, and especially adolescents, are masters at this. Every parent has had that time, perhaps embarrassingly, when their children do something that's distinctly and undeniably the parent's behavior. An act could be an action, a phrase, or repeating something, but it's undeniably the parent. Parents and siblings are usually the closest and most available people for very young children to model their behavior after. Consider it a survival value for that child. They're completely dependent on the adults around them for everything. Food, clothing, shelter, approval, acceptance, everything that they need. That means that in order to get those things, the child needs to not only fit in, but please the suppliers of those needs. They learn to act like them, and they learn where the boundaries of behavior are, what they're allowed to do and not allowed to do, by watching, listening, and trying it out for themselves. This is where Albert Bandura comes in. In the 1960s, he did a series of experiments with children and an inflatable clown doll. Here's Bandura himself talking about these experiments.
The segment you're about to see is taken from an early experiment on learning of aggressive styles of behavior through modeling. Children watched a filmed adult perform novel aggressive acts toward a inflated doll, and the physical aggression was accompanied by novel hostile remarks. We later measured how much of this modeled aggression the children had learned just by watching. Now, the measurement of learning of aggression uses simulated targets rather than live ones. For example, to test how well bombardiers have learned bombing strategies, you would use simulated targets rather than require them to bomb San Francisco or New York. The model pummeled the doll with a mallet, flung it in the air, kicked it repeatedly.
This tells us, according to Bandura, that children model their behavior after role models. In safe situations, practice these behaviors in play, which then leads to the behaviors becoming ingrained and unquestioned behavior later in life. What's modeled is considered normal and performed without thought or question. Any behavior or action outside of that demonstrated and practiced norms becomes unacceptable and abnormal in the mind and emotions of that person, most likely for the rest of their lives. For Bandura, this explains anything and everything, from religious and political belief to patterns of violence and abuse being passed from generation to generation. Of course, I have been informed by a reliable source that Bandura may not have considered that clown dolls are inherently creepy and therefore deserve to be attacked. In the 1950s and 60s, it was a prevailing belief that observing violent behavior, like sporting events such as boxing, or violence in movies and television, was a vicarious emotional outlet, and people acted more civilized because of it. According to Bandura, the opposite is true. He claims that observed behavior violent behavior begets more violent behavior. Therefore, violence in movies, on television, and in the media teaches children to be violent. This was disputed in a 1971 study by Feshbach and Singer, who found that adolescent boys who watched non-violent programming for 6 weeks were more likely to be violent than boys who watched violent programming for 6 weeks. This was referred to as the catharsis effect by Gerbner, Gross, and Melody, who also noted that the setting of Bandura's experiment was contrived and artificial, and would therefore give artificial results. In 1976, Bandura defended his studies, noted that all experiments were in some form or fashion artificial in order to control variables, and Feshbach and Singer's studies on adolescent boys was invalid because while violent programming teaches violence, better behaviors such as kindness, empathy, and understanding also teach those behaviors. This brings up an interesting and important point. While the Bobo doll experiments were eye-catching, social learning theory is complex and encompasses all behavior, not just violence. Social learning theory is made up of 5 parts or principles. Reciprocal determinism is the interconnection between a person's learned behaviors and beliefs, their environmental and social influences, and the person's response to them. Behavioral capacity refers to a person's ability to carry out an action, i.e. know what to do and how to do it. Observational learning is modeling behavior, the ability to observe the behaviors and actions of others and then repeat them. Reinforcements, which are the positive and negative responses to behavior, whether internally given through self-talk and emotion or externally enforced through social pressure or more extreme measures. Expectations are what one can expect to happen as a result of their actions, whether positive or negative. One criticism of social learning theory was that, like B.F. Skinner's behaviorism, there is no room for self-determination. Social learning theory implies that behaviors and beliefs are externally imposed and cannot be internally constructed through one's own challenging and evolving thoughts, considerations, and beliefs. In 1986, Bandura agreed and changed the name of his theory to social cognitive theory and added a 6th principle: self-efficacy, which is a person's level of ability to perform a behavior as well as the capacity for metacognition, for self-examination, necessary for deciding to make a behavior change and actually making that change. However, the basic structure of social learning theory and social cognitive theory are the same. Learning happens in the context of social and environmental conditions, and the resulting behaviors are the result of a person interacting with their environment and the behavior of others. So what does all of this have to do with our new student caught in the social learning zone? The new student has no social supports or people to model, but they do have experience of what their previous school or schools are like. There are certain expectations, such as teachers and administrations and staff being helpful. Every positive experience interacting with staff gives our new student one more small behavioral expectation about their environment that they can count on. Each experience they have will teach them whether it's physically or emotionally safe, or whether it's not. Now, we all know from our own experience that adults form cliques, groups of like interest, ability, or social class, that students in these cliques can be emotionally cruel to others and in extreme cases violent, or they can be supportive. This shapes their own behavior, and social learning theory says that because people we're around shape our behaviors in both positive and negative ways, we cannot expect this not to happen, especially with students who are in developmental stages where they're forming their own identities. What we can do as teachers is to present our own behaviors for emulation and encourage our students to be diverse in their interactions with others and to see qualities in people that they may find worthy of emulation and to broaden their viewpoint outside of the groups that promote only their own known behaviors and viewpoints. That way, all of our students consider wider cultural behaviors and beliefs, even practices, as normal, even if those behaviors are not their own. Come to think of it, we could probably do more of that ourselves.